A billionaire single father thought he had everything: wealth, power, influence. But one unexpected encounter inside his own mansion revealed something he had never considered: that love, compassion, and humanity can't be bought. This is the story of how a simple act of kindness from a nanny feeding his child changed not just his home, but his entire life. The mansion stood like a fortress of wealth, its marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers, walls lined with priceless art, and rooms so vast they seemed to swallow sound. Yet despite all its grandeur, a certain emptiness lingered in the air. The billionaire moved through the halls with the practiced precision of someone who had conquered every boardroom and negotiation, yet his eyes betrayed a quiet fatigue. His days were a blur of conference calls, meetings, and endless financial responsibilities, each one more demanding than the last. Numbers, contracts, and deals consumed him, leaving little room for warmth or human connection. He had everything the world said mattered, yet in the quiet moments, when the city lights flickered outside his towering windows, he felt a void that money could never fill. In the nursery, life moved differently. The room was bright and cheerful, painted in soft pastels, with a crib positioned near the window so the morning sun could gently wake the baby. Yet even here the child often seemed lonely. Staff came and went like clockwork: nannies, maids, assistants, each performing their duties efficiently, yet none forming a bond that mattered. The house felt transactional, a place where care was measured in hours and responsibilities rather than love. The child cried for a heartbeat of attention, and though it was answered, it was fleeting, almost mechanical. One afternoon, distracted by an urgent call, the billionaire wandered down a hallway he hadn't walked in weeks. He opened the door to the nursery and froze. There she was, the new nanny, feeding his baby with a tenderness that stopped him in his tracks. It wasn't the stiff professionalism he expected, nor the hurried efficiency that had marked previous caregivers. She held the infant close, murmuring softly, her voice a gentle rhythm that seemed to soothe both body and soul. The baby's tiny fingers grasped her hand instinctively, and a soft coo escaped, a sound that filled the room with warmth. The billionaire felt a strange twist in his chest, something unfamiliar, something he hadn't felt in years. He stayed by the doorway, unsure if he should interrupt or remain hidden. No one had ever cared for his child like this, not even he. He had bought every toy, hired every tutor, built the most luxurious nursery, yet none of it had created this connection, this moment of peace. The nanny's movements were natural, effortless yet deliberate. Every burp, every gentle pat, every whispered word seemed to exist solely for the comfort of the baby. The infant snuggled closer, head resting on her shoulder, eyes half closed in trust. And in that instant, the billionaire realized that wealth could purchase comfort, security, even luxury, but it could not manufacture love. He wanted to call her out, to remind her that this was a household run by rules and schedules, not whims and tenderness. But the scene before him held him captive. He observed the way her eyes softened whenever the baby smiled, how her hands moved with a care that seemed almost instinctual, how her voice carried a calm authority that made the infant feel safe. There was no pretense, no calculation, only genuine care. He felt a pang of guilt, a realization that despite all his resources, he had failed to give his own child the attention and warmth they deserved. As she continued feeding, humming a tune that seemed to have no beginning or end, the billionaire quietly studied every detail. He noticed the way she adjusted the baby's tiny blanket, the gentle rocking of the crib, the subtle changes in posture to ensure comfort. The room, once cold and lifeless, seemed suddenly alive with connection. The walls, that had echoed with emptiness, now held the soft sound of laughter and coos. Yet even as he acknowledged the beauty of the moment, he forced himself to rationalize it away. "Just doing her job," he muttered silently, repeating the words like a shield against the unexpected tug at his heart. Still, the feeling lingered. Something inside him had shifted, a seed of awareness planted in the fertile soil of exhaustion and regret. The sight of his child wrapped safely in the arms of someone who genuinely cared was unsettling, but in a way that demanded reflection. He turned away eventually, leaving the room as quietly as he had entered, yet the image stayed burned in his mind. The tiny fingers, the soft voice, the innocent trust, and the simple, undeniable power of compassion. For the first time in years, he understood that life's most valuable moments were not measured in wealth, titles, or achievements, but in connection, care, and the quiet acts that made hearts whole. Even as he returned to the relentless rhythm of his work, a part of him remained in that nursery, frozen in that quiet tableau of love. The billionaire, for all his accomplishments, had witnessed something money could not buy, and deep inside, he knew that nothing would ever feel the same again. The days that followed the first unexpected glimpse into the nursery carried a strange tension. The billionaire noticed subtle changes in the household, small signs he had never anticipated. His child laughed more often, the sound spilling like sunlight across the marble floors, a sharp contrast to the usual quiet that filled the grand mansion. Crying, once a constant in his absence, became rare, almost non-existent, replaced by coos, gurgles, and tiny, eager attempts to reach for the nanny. At first, he told himself it was coincidence, an adjustment period for a new caretaker. Yet, he could not ignore the way the baby's eyes brightened the moment she entered the room, the fingers curling instinctively around her hand, seeking comfort that he had never managed to provide. A deep, unfamiliar pang of jealousy wormed its way into his chest, tightly entwined with guilt. He had everything: wealth, influence, freedom, but he lacked the one thing money could not buy: presence. In an effort to regain control, he began to impose stricter schedules, timing feedings, to the minute, giving precise instructions for every diaper change, every nap. The nanny, calm and composed, followed these rules without complaint, yet she never lost the natural warmth that had first unsettled him. She adjusted blankets with care, sang soft refrains that seemed to echo beyond the room, and held the child with a gentle, unwavering attention. No matter how exacting he became, her presence remained tender and patient, a quiet defiance of the cold efficiency he demanded. Watching this, he realized that discipline alone could not replace connection, that love was not measured in adherence to instructions, but in the invisible bonds formed through touch, voice, and presence. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of negotiations and calls, he wandered past the nursery once again. From the doorway, he heard it, a lullaby, soft and steady, floating through the dimly lit room. The baby, restless moments before, had quieted instantly, eyes closing in serene slumber. The billionaire froze, the familiar surge of irritation mingling with something heavier, a strange awe. He had tried countless techniques, every gadget and device designed to soothe his child, yet none had worked. And here was this woman, simply singing, and the baby obeyed her gentle rhythm without hesitation. His chest tightened with an unfamiliar emotion, recognition of his own inadequacy. That night, frustration overtook curiosity. He entered the nursery, voice sharp, questioning why she felt entitled to act beyond the instructions he had laid out. His words carried accusation and impatience, a challenge to what he could not control. The nanny looked up, calm and unflinching, meeting his gaze with eyes that seemed to hold neither fear nor anger, only quiet clarity. "Children," she said softly, "don't need more money. They don't need more toys, more luxuries, more schedules. They need love, time, and security. That is what truly shapes them." Her words, simple yet profound, struck him harder than any boardroom defeat ever had. For the first time in years, the billionaire confronted the reality of his absence. He had been present in body but absent in soul, trading moments of connection for meetings and contracts. He had measured care in expenditures rather than actions, assuming that wealth alone could compensate for the void he had left in his child's life. Now, confronted by this gentle but unyielding truth, he felt the weight of his own neglect. The room, once vibrant with laughter and warmth, seemed suddenly to echo with his failures. Yet, despite the sting, he could not summon the words to admit her rightness. Pride and habit anchored him, making retreat the only feasible option. He left the nursery quietly, the lullaby fading behind him like a whisper of what he had been missing. Alone in his office, surrounded by contracts and screens displaying numbers that meant little in comparison to the life within the nursery walls, he struggled with a storm of conflicting emotions. Guilt pressed against his chest, jealousy gnawed at his pride, and yet beneath it all, a seed of understanding began to take root. Perhaps love could not be bought, and perhaps connection required humility and effort, qualities he had long ignored. Though shaken, he made no rash decisions. He did not fire her, nor did he confront her again that night. Instead, he allowed the words and the image of his peacefully sleeping child to linger in his mind. The mansion, vast and cold, felt even emptier as he walked its halls, but in that emptiness he sensed the possibility of change. For the first time, he began to realize that the house, for all its grandeur, was not a home without presence, care, and the simple, patient acts that bridge the gap between parent and child. And so, he retreated silently, unwilling yet unable to ignore the quiet, transformative power of the nanny's unwavering dedication. Days passed, and the billionaire found himself drawn to the nursery in ways he could not explain. Curiosity, previously buried beneath layers of pride and obligation, began to surface. He watched quietly from doorways and hallways as the nanny went about her day, observing the subtle ways she interacted with his child. She read aloud from picture books, her voice soft and expressive, turning simple words into melodies that seemed to dance through the room. She sang lullabies and improvised songs, her hands moving gently to soothe and entertain. She played on the floor, encouraging the baby to reach, grasp, and laugh, celebrating every small victory with genuine delight. Each moment he witnessed chipped away at the fortress of his ego, replacing it with a tentative understanding that connection required more than authority. It required patience, attention, and heart. He began to recognize that his child responded to love, not schedules, and that the warmth he had never offered was precisely what the baby craved. The shift in his perspective was accelerated by a day of chaos. A major deal had gone awry, threatening millions and triggering a cascade of frustration and anger. He stormed into the nursery, emotions raw and unchecked, intending only to escape the suffocating pressure of the office. In his mind, the nursery had been a place of brief respite, a controlled environment where he could glance at his child without confronting his own inadequacies. That calm was shattered. Papers, phone calls, and threats of financial loss had left him brittle and sharp. Yet, as he entered, he expected to see disarray, an intrusion into the ordered world he tried to maintain. Instead, he found the nanny kneeling on the floor, holding the baby securely, speaking in a calm, measured voice that cut through his storm. "Breathe," she said, her tone neither timid nor accusatory. "Children feel everything parents carry. They absorb your tension before they even understand it. Slow down. Be here." Her words struck him with the force of revelation. He had never been spoken to in such a way, never confronted with truth so quietly and powerfully. The sheer courage it took to address him, a man accustomed to commanding rooms and dictating outcomes, left him stunned. For a long moment he simply stood, feeling the tension in his chest ease as if her calm had a gravity of its own. The baby cooed softly, unconcerned by the storm of emotions surrounding them. Yet the moment anchored him to a reality he had ignored. Presence mattered more than perfection, love more than control. From that day onward, he began to participate in small, deliberate ways, guided subtly by the nanny. He initiated brief moments of play, learning to make his child laugh with peekaboo, to respond when tiny fingers reached for his hand, to attempt feedings that he had once outsourced entirely. Each success, no matter how small, was a revelation. He began to notice expressions of joy on the baby's face, eyes lighting up in recognition, lips curling in delighted smiles. For the first time, he felt the weight of responsibility transform into something tangible and precious. He was no longer merely a provider of resources. He was a participant in life, an active presence shaping his child's experiences. A stormy night crystallized the transformation. Thunder rattled the windows and rain pelted the mansion with relentless intensity. The power went out, leaving the rooms dim, the walls casting long shadows. Candlelight flickered, creating an intimate warmth that had never existed in the grand halls. The three of them, father, child, and nanny, sat together, the baby nestled between them, listening to stories and laughter that filled the space more than any chandelier ever could. The billionaire felt a profound shift within himself, a recognition that home was not defined by size, opulence, or status, but by the presence of care, connection, and shared experience. In the quiet glow of candlelight, the mansion, once cold and lifeless, finally felt inhabited. It resonated with sound, movement, and the kind of love that could not be bought or measured. The billionaire, who had spent years defining himself through power and achievement, discovered a deeper truth. Fatherhood required courage, humility, and patience. It was in the playful gestures, the shared stories, and the quiet understanding of another human being's needs that he found meaning. For the first time, he truly understood the transformative power of simple, consistent care, and the extraordinary impact of allowing oneself to be vulnerable, to break down walls, and to embrace connection. The storm raged outside, yet inside, the mansion hummed with life. Laughter mingled with soft coos and gentle guidance, filling the air with warmth. The billionaire felt a newfound sense of belonging, a connection that transcended wealth, status, and control. In that moment, he realized that the walls he had built around himself and his child were unnecessary. Love and presence were far more powerful than any fortress, and the lessons imparted by the nanny had begun to reshape not only his home, but the very way he understood what it meant to be a father. The following morning, the billionaire sat in his expansive office, the city sprawled beneath him like a glittering promise he no longer felt compelled to chase. The quiet hum of the building's air system and the faint clatter of distant traffic filled the space, but his mind was fixed on one person alone, the nanny. He had called her in, his fingers drumming nervously on the polished mahogany desk. As she entered, her expression was cautious, measured. She assumed immediately that she had overstepped, that her gentle firmness and honesty had led to her dismissal. Perhaps she thought she would be leaving the mansion that day, replaced by another caretaker who would follow orders without question. Yet, when she looked into his eyes, she saw something different, something she had never witnessed in him before: humility. The billionaire took a slow breath, his voice uncharacteristically steady. He thanked her. The words felt foreign on his tongue, weighted with meaning he had seldom expressed aloud. "I never knew how to truly be a father," he admitted, "until I saw how you cared for my child, until I saw the patience, the attention, the love that I had been too blind to give." The nanny's eyes widened, disbelief mixing with cautious hope. She had worked in countless households, cared for children whose parents were absent, distracted, or indifferent, but rarely had anyone spoken so openly about their own shortcomings with such sincerity. She could feel the depth of his words, the gravity behind the acknowledgement, and for a moment she allowed herself to breathe. Unsure of what would come next, he continued, his tone firm yet tender, offering her more than just a role or a job title. He offered her a permanent place in his child's life, a responsibility not bound by contract or schedule, but by trust and respect. She was overwhelmed, emotions flooding her in a mixture of relief, pride, and surprise. The offer was unprecedented, a recognition of the work she had done without expectation of reward, a validation of the quiet impact she had made in a household that had long lacked warmth. The billionaire, for all his wealth and influence, had finally realized that her contribution was invaluable, not because it could be measured in hours or efficiency, but because it had reshaped the very foundation of his family. The change did not go unnoticed beyond the walls of the mansion. The community began to observe a man transformed. Once distant and untouchable, he now appeared in public with a softness previously unseen. He pushed the stroller through the park, laughing as his child reached for the pigeons or squealed at the sight of a dog. Neighbors whispered, noting the shift in demeanor, the formerly aloof billionaire engaging with the simplest joys of life, shedding the armor of status for the vulnerability of presence. The gossip spread quickly. How could a man of such power be guided, even shaped, by someone so ordinary? The whispers carried a mixture of incredulity, admiration, and a touch of envy, but the billionaire paid them no mind. He had discovered a truth far more valuable than reputation or opinion. Connection and love mattered more than wealth or social standing. The mansion itself reflected the transformation. Where once it had felt cold, sterile, and intimidating, it now pulsed with life. Laughter, chatter, and coos echoed through the hallways, weaving a soundscape of genuine family moments. The walls, lined with expensive art and priceless artifacts, no longer felt distant or intimidating. They held warmth now, shaped by the soft touch of care, by bedtime stories read with patience, by gentle guidance and consistent attention. The billionaire found himself smiling freely, participating in play, holding the baby through the quiet moments of the day, allowing himself to be vulnerable and present. Even in the presence of the city's relentless pace and the constant demands of business, he had discovered a rhythm he had never known, one guided not by deadlines, meetings, or contracts, but by the heartbeat of a child and the steady, compassionate presence of the nanny who had taught him to see what truly mattered. He no longer measured success in power or possessions. He measured it in moments of laughter, in the quiet satisfaction of a baby's contentment, in the realization that love could not be purchased but could be cultivated, nurtured, and shared. And as the narrator reflects, the lesson resonates beyond the walls of the mansion or the particulars of a single household. In the end, it wasn't billions that built a family. It was one woman's kindness, one baby's need, and one father's decision to finally open his heart. The story, while personal and intimate, carries a universal truth. Connection cannot be substituted by wealth, status, or power. It is forged in patience, attention, and care, and it transforms those who embrace it in ways that no material possession ever could. The billionaire, once a man defined by fortune and influence, had learned the most valuable lesson of all: to be present, to be patient, and to let love lead where ambition had failed.